Mm-mm-mm. Well, hey, welcome to Social Disruption, the show that shatters comfort zones, flips the script, and delivers unfiltered truth. I'm your host, Farah.
And I'm Cheyenne. Together, we're here to disrupt the airways with real conversations, no filters, no apologies.
Trigger warning, this is a show where a spine isn't optional and the truth cuts deep. Let's get into it. First of all, thank you, anyone and everyone who will end up joining us tonight. I know we're a few minutes late. You know how technical difficulties go. We got it all squared away. We have a great show for you this evening. I'm so happy that you can join us. For anyone that hasn't gotten to know personally my new co-host, Cheyenne. Cheyenne, please introduce yourself. This is the first time that you're on any one of my channels, face front. So just say hi to everyone.
Hello, everybody, and hello, Farah. It is lovely to see you, as always. I certainly enjoy our banter and going back and forth. So, yes, my name is Cheyenne. I go by Shiny sometimes. I'm a mom. I've got two of my own boys, and then I've got a stepson and a stepdaughter. I have a fuzzband who will become my husband in October. Ooh.
I love
and
the fuzzband.
I love the fuzzband. And I work in education. I've been in education for since 1999, not to age myself. Currently, I am a big advocate for the deaf community and underserved populations. But I also enjoy doing this gig with Farah, and we have been having a blast rocking out and sharing unfiltered stories and real truths.
I love it. And we've had great response to the show. Actually, a lot more response now that we've gone live and we're having 3 shows that'll be coming up a week, in a week, Monday and Wednesdays. We will be live 6:30 p.m. through the Podbean app. So make sure the app is free to download, everybody. So download the Podbean app, go in, make yourself a little account, follow Social Disruption so that way you're always notified when we do go live. Same with our YouTube channel. Again, it's free to subscribe. It's not a Patreon to get these lives. So do that. We have a lot of great guests coming up for you. Just a little bit about Monday's guest. Well, first of all, the whole show, which will be on Podbean, is going to be revolving around the culture war. There's a lot of times where we're going to have shows that are just going to be kind of like a culture war episode where we talk about something that's in society and culture. And what we're going to focus on Monday is, should porn be illegal? And we are going to have a guest, Vic Legina, who was 20 years as a producer and director in the porn industry. So I'm very excited to find out his thoughts. And of course, we all want you to join on Monday, because if you go through the Podbean app, you actually have an option to chat with us. So you can come into the chat room or not. If you like to just be on your own and listen, that's fine too. But if you come into chat, you can also have the opportunity to call in. So if you want to ask any of our guests or us a question, feel free to do that. That's what it's for. But I'd love for you to all join in and see. I'd like to think what you all think about porn. Should it be illegal? What is it doing to our society? So stay tuned for that. But let's get into tonight's episode, which is titled From Millions to Rock Bottom and Back, the unfiltered story of, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, Rahul Athavale. We'll get a little nod. I can see him in the backstage area. Oh, yes, I think I might have did it. So, of course, I always write an intro to prepare for the guests, because I think with everything that they've gone through in their stories and their experiences, they deserve a red carpet before they come on the show. So, what does it take to rebuild your life after losing everything, your money, your freedom, and even your reputation? On this episode of Social Disruption, we sit down with Rahul Athavale, a Stanford Law graduate, turned entrepreneur who sold his first company to Google only to end up in federal prison for money laundering for the cartels. With 32 million seized and his life in ruins, he had two choices: stay defeated or fight for redemption. Now 9 years sober, congratulations, Raul, and financially free. Once again, Raul is using his experiences to help others, proving that even in our darkest moments, there is a way forward. We're not here for the surface level conversation. You got to know us. We're digging deep into his past, in his downfall, and the brutal realities of rebuilding from nothing. And for those who think this is just another finance story, think again. This is about survival, resilience, and a whole new way to look at success. So join us now for this live conversation where nothing is off limits. And if you're struggling in these hard times, Raul's got a message for you. You can take back control. So let's welcome him on to Social Disruption.
Hi.
Hello.
So Cheyenne, did you start teaching when you were 5? I mean,
oh my goodness, that's very sweet. I really enjoyed that.
She did.
Yes, actually, I did.
awesome.
I was a very smart kid.
Obviously.
She was there. Well, we told everybody when Raul first came on, just to touch base with him first, I said, he is way too good looking to be put on YouTube. I don't want to get the ladies keep emailing me and be like, who is that gentleman? Because he is, oh man, he is a handsome man. And thank you so much for joining us this evening and taking the time to go through our technical difficulties with us. How are you, sir?
I am fantastic. I was actually playing tennis with my daughter and my wife, and I was like, shit, it's 5 or 6 your time. And so I ran over here, but I'm glad I got a chance to relax a little bit before the podcast.
Always good to get a breather. Always good to get a breather. So when we have guests, Raul, we start off with an icebreaker question, which I'm excited to ask you especially. So here it is. If you could have dinner with any 3 people, alive or dead, who would it be? And you also have to explain why.
Sure. So I would have dinner with Mahatma Gandhi, with his name is Shivaji Maharaj, and I'll explain who he was. Shivaji Maharaj, Mahatma Gandhi, and Genghis Khan. And so, and the reason none of those people are alive, as we know, or don't know. So Genghis Khan, for what he did militarily, and interesting thing about Genghis Khan is, yes, he did some pretty horrific things across the world, but he also very forcefully brought education along the way. So I'm very curious why. Like, why would you go and rape and pillage and murder and force education, which was very advanced education for the places that he was bringing this education? I find it fascinating, because generally when people go and rape and pillage and murder across lands, they're not also bringing education. They're bringing their education, but normally it's a type of education where it's, we are better than you and we are superior, and you need to know that our race is better than your race. That's not, at least historically, what we know is that's not what he brought. He brought mathematics. He brought a new understanding of science, or his forces did. So I find that very curious. The other thing is, he had very interesting warnings for the future for people like him, saying, this, you think you're doing some amazing things now, but this will turn on you, and you will breed such hatred that you will destroy your own empires. And I think our existing politicians could probably learn something from that.
100% on that.
What Gandhi did and who he was. Gandhi today in India is generally hated. He's strongly disliked. You talk to most Indians today. My mom is a good example. She thinks Gandhi should have been assassinated when he was 10, because the belief is that Gandhi actually sold India out to the Muslims, right? So the Modi of today, I might sit down with Modi also, but the Modi of today, the existing prime minister of India, is an Indian nationalist, and what he believes is that India is a secular, is a Hindu nation, Hindu state, and anyone who's Muslim or really just Muslims. I mean, he's very anti-Islam. He would never say that, but if you just look at the policies, it's like saying Trump is not anti-Islam. Well, look at his policies. His policies would say otherwise, right? So Modi is very similar. Now, I personally like Modi because I think he's done some good things for India. So Gandhi was of the opinion that we need to work with this massive Muslim population, and he did it the best way he could. I also am a big believer in this idea of using peace, but also using force. So something most people don't know about India is India, Gandhi was the face, right? Right? Like it'd be one thing to say we want our freedom, but we're going to go and use. Can you guys hear me?
I hear you just fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I lost the connection for a second. So
we're all in different places. So yeah, there might be some
sorry.
lag. That's definitely expected. Hello to live.
Okay, cool. So Gandhi, what Gandhi was the face of this movement, this nonviolent movement. What was also going on at the same time for Britain? So they were getting publicly beat up, right? They were using force on these people doing nonviolent movements. The other thing that was happening is a group of Indians were going to Hitler at the time and saying, give us weapons so that we can go to war against the British in the background of this Gandhi movement. They were Hindu nationalists. In fact, one of the people that did assassinate Gandhi was a Hindu nationalist. So I would talk to Gandhi and say, listen, do you know you're going to be assassinated? And you had lots of warnings that you were going to be assassinated. Why did you continue to be out there? Why did you knowingly, intentionally not get security? What was the reason? So I'd be very curious about that because I think he could have done a lot more good in the world. And then Shivaji Maharaj was a very interesting character. He was a Indian, 16 years old. When India was controlled by the Mughal Empire, at 16 years old, he took his first fort. He was raised in a Brahmin Hindu family, but he understood that the decimation of Hindu culture was something that was intolerable. Now, at the time, the way war was you entered a town, you raped and pillaged. It was just what you did, right? Unfortunately, I don't think wars changed much. He had a very strong attitude about how women, specifically women and children, should be treated. So if he found out that any woman was ever raped, the officer or the military official or the soldier who was in his army that did the rape would be castrated and then hung. And so there was no raping and pillaging going on, right? Because to him, human life, just because we're on two sides of a war, doesn't mean we're any less human. We just have viewpoints that couldn't be resolved diplomatically. So one, he was a phenomenal diplomat, but he was also an amazing military. He was just a phenomenal soldier and understood the land and understood human psychology. Unfortunately, like most amazing leaders, if they don't educate their children on how to run the dynasty, it falls apart. And that's what happened with him. After he died, his sons, who were spoiled and who never really had to work, the whole thing kind of fell apart. He had pushed the British out of India for about 100 years. And then when his kids died, or he died, and his kids died, his grandkids really is what allowed the British to move back in. So those would be the three.
Those were great picks. And you actually educated me on each one of them. I didn't, I would have asked Gandhi the same question because I know all the great things that he did. And why wouldn't you protect yourself to keep on being the martyr that you are? I mean, that's wow. Well, I love your picks. Actually, very good picks. And you're only the second person to answer that. So I love seeing all the different people that everyone picks. But so now we're going to get into the questions that we have for you. And of course, I always like to start out with chronologically. So as far as before all the success the law degree, the millions. Where did you grow up? What was your family life like?
So I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida. My dad was a successful engineer with IBM. My mom, a successful occupational therapist. I grew up in a traditional, like a traditional East Indian family, and I grew up Hindu. So if you know anything about Hinduism, you know a whole hell of a lot more than I do, because I don't know shit about Hinduism. But what I do know about is what it means to grow up in an Indian family where we have pictures of gods everywhere, right? We had pictures of Ganesh and pictures of Krishna, and mostly Ganesh because it's a Ganesh family. But the real God in our family was the almighty US dollar. And if you had money, you were God. And if you didn't, you weren't. Now, my dad never said that to us, but that was what we saw, right? Why? Because what was, like my parents, my dad grew up poor. He was dirt poor in India, but his family valued education. And so they put him through, they got him, or he got himself into IIT, right? Which is the most prestigious university in India. And it's right now it's the most prestigious engineering school in the world. The best of the best go to IIT. They're recruited out of IIT to work at all the big tech companies that we have. So he went to IIT. Now, he couldn't afford to go to IIT, and they didn't have scholarships. So one of his friend's dads gave him a loan that when he could pay back, he did, and he paid that guy back immediately. My mom, on the other hand, and they had an arranged marriage. My mom, on the other hand, grew up very rich. My grandfather was a corrupt politician. I'm not proud of it, but it's the truth, right? So he was a corrupt politician in India. He was one of these guys that worked in the transition government and probably robbed the country blind. And we didn't know any of that. I didn't know any of that till I was an adult, like till he was long gone. I learned about a lot of it from my uncle and some cousins who knew him, and so knew about that part of his life. But so my mom was rich, but they still got married. Why? They had an arranged marriage. The reason was arranged marriages, if done properly, they can work really well. My parents was a fucking shit show. I mean, they should never have gotten married. They should have gotten a divorce before we were born, and they would have been two very happy people. But they didn't do that. And culturally, they're still together on paper, but my mom is right now traveling somewhere, and my dad lives with us here in Mexico, in Mazatlan, Mexico. It makes me very happy to know that. And he's got Parkinson's, and so I love that I get to have my dad here.
Just because you brought it up with the corrupt politician part, since we know a lot about that in the US, it just makes me have a question off the cuff. How does a family react to that? Like, how do they react to a family member being corrupt like that and having a part of the government? Because we see that so much here. So I never, we don't get to ask anybody here, of course, hey, Hillary, why are you corrupt?
Right.
But how does a family deal with that when it happens?
I think people don't care. I mean, that's what I've come to realize, is that people just don't care. And the U.S. is in many ways, it's becoming like India or Mexico or any other country where there's heavy corruption, where it's just like not just part of life. It's just part of the way things work here. And I think it's unfortunate, but true. One thing that most Americans have wrong is we as Americans want to believe that our country isn't corrupt and that we are not Mexico and that we're not Indonesia, we're not wherever. We are Indonesia, we are Mexico, and we are Thailand, or wherever those places are. All of our politicians are corrupt. And the way that we know that is just look at the most recent Supreme Court ruling on this, that said, and this is what the ruling states. Think about the insanity of this. And this is legal. Ready? You, Farah, can go do an act, and then I can give you money, and that's not corrupt. But if I give you money and you go do an act, that's corrupt. Okay, so watch. You're a politician with a lot of power. I'm an oil and gas company. And I say, Farah, listen, I really want you to open up Yosemite National. Well, I can't open up Yosemite. okay, well, you don't have to open up Yosemite, but right outside of Yosemite, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill straight down, and then I'm going to turn that drill, and I'm going to drill about a mile under Yosemite. And so I'm going to be getting oil that's under Yosemite, right? And that's illegal, okay? That's very illegal. However, you, Farah, the politician you are going to give me a special exemption that lets me do environmental studies, knowing that I'll be drilling for oil. Now, and then you say to me, well, Rahul, I would really need about $1 million to allow you to do that. And I would say, well, okay, that sounds good. Now you go do it. So we've had this conversation, but no money has changed hands. Now you go do it. Now you go and do that exact thing. You get me this exemption. I go and start drilling, and then I give you the $1 million. That is 100% legal. That's legal, 100% legal. And it was, and that was determined by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's my daughter.
Hi, hello.
Right. So that's legal. Illegal would be if I gave you the money and then you did it.
Either way, so then I guess everything that Doge is finding of all these crazy, insane things that are overseas, and they think it's a Sesame Street for Iraq or Iran or whatever. I bet you, like you said, it could be, no, they were asked to do something, but let's put it under this topic so it could be done. Like I said, it's off. It wasn't a question of mine. It just, as you talked, I was like, well, since he actually had someone in his family, I just want to know, where does that greed stem from?
Yeah, so where it lands is nobody cares. It's like, well, it's just part of life, right? It's just part of life. I mean, when I get pulled over in Mexico, I just pay the cops. Now, my wife hates it. She's like, this, you shouldn't do this, and this feeds the system, and blah. I'm like, listen, I would rather give this guy 500 pesos, which he needs more than I do, and I don't have to spend 10 minutes arguing with him about something retarded. So let's just get this done. And that attitude isn't yet in the U.S. But as I'm watching things go in the U.S., we as a country will get there. When we start seeing the oligarchs really take over, we think they've taken over now. When we really start seeing them take over, when we really start seeing corruption at the highest level, it will just go there. That's where the country will go. I have no doubt in my mind.
Wow. Okay. So your family had an arranged marriage. It didn't go very well.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they're still married, but it was a shit show. I mean, they were always fighting. There's nothing really healthy at all about it. I mean, now they just have a codependent relationship, but it is what it is.
So how were you as a teen then being raised in that? I mean, did you try to stay away from the home as much as you could, or?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sort of. I had a lot of friends, and so I would spend a lot of time at my friends' houses. But honestly, I was a super dork and nerd, and not even a dork. Like, I was a nerd, right? I had like 3 friends. And I think the truth of the matter is, what that did to me as a kid was, I didn't like myself. I didn't like the fact that I was Indian. I have 2 different colored eyes. I wished I was like a boring white dude with blue eyes and blonde hair and fat, right? I wished I was something else. I wanted to be something else. I didn't like that. I didn't like myself. In fact, I fundamentally hated who I was. I didn't know it at the time, but I was depressed a lot. And a lot of that changed in college. So in college, when I got a chance to get away and go 3 hours away to the University of Central Florida, is when I blossomed and I became very social. I joined a fraternity. I finally could talk to girls, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to sleep with everybody I can. Right. And so I didn't sleep with everybody I could, but I tried. And so that was how life progressed. And now, what's funny is, now that I have a daughter, I'm like, I know what a dirtbag guy looks like, because I was that guy. So, and she just waves.
As she walks by in the background, is that who you're talking about? Right? As she's
guys will flirt with her, and I'm like, no, I have an energy about him, dirtbag.
Absolutely.
Dirtbag. Right. Go ahead, Cheyenne.
Yeah, so I love how you're talking about, blossoming in college, but was there a moment earlier on in your life, or even maybe in your college years, when you were like, I'm different in a good way? And when you realized that, how do you think other people kind of responded to that? Or what did others not know that you wanted
I
to
don't
share
know.
with them?
So that's a very good question, Cheyenne. There was a moment in senior year of high school when I still remember where it was. It was a senior trip. We went somewhere. I think Hawaii maybe. Um, and I ended up like hooking up with this girl, and all of my like, and I remember I'm this dorky nerdy dude and this girl was Hawaiian. She was American but lived in Hawaii, and all of like the cool kids were like, dude, how did you hook up with her? Like what? And and like very publicly she hung out with us, and in that moment I was like, what changed? And she said it to them. She's like, he was just honest. Like, he's cute and he's funny and he was honest with me. And he said to me, like, I'm a dork and I'm a nerd, but that's who I am. And if you don't like it, basically I said, if you don't like it, just like the cool kids are over there. And she was like, and I hadn't engaged with that before. And I liked it. It was really, and so I was like, oh, so I could just be honest, sort of like semi-honest. And then what I realized was that, and then I started to realize that what I do have is an ability to read and understand people better than I think other people had. I thought everybody had this ability. And I think I got the ability as a result of like seeing my parents have this very messed up engagement all the time, where even if I learned to read body language, because my mom would say I'm fine and my dad would say I'm fine, but their body language said something totally different. And it was very subtle body language, and I got good at reading that. And then I got good at reading the body language and then the energies that people put out, and realized, oh, this is a skill. And what did happen in college, in my fraternity, and I started several businesses in college, some that were successful, some that failed, was that I got good at reading that information about people to succeed. Now, I had no moral compass at all. I don't know why, but I just didn't. I think part of the reason is I saw my only moral compass was making money. Like, I need to make money. And I started to experiment with alcohol and cocaine and then sex in college, not in high school, in college. And whatever like light moral compass I would have had was gone. I mean, I put like drugs and alcohol in my body, and good effing luck, right? Like there is, in fact, I remember in college, like talk about crazy. I went to a therapist and I said, and I was drunk when I went to this therapist. And he's like, you don't think you should not maybe have drank? And I was like, no, I don't see the point. It's just, I can do college well without with drinking. He's like, I think you have antisocial personality disorder. I'm like, isn't that great? I don't like people. And he's like, no, that's not what that means. Right? And so, and I was like, whatever. And I just kept doing my life. Well, what I've realized since then is that when I put booze or I put drug into my body, I literally have a complete personality change. And I am not a good person. I'm an ugly, ugly person that uses these God-given gifts to do whatever I want. And it's normally something that's going to harm others, or it's going to, quote unquote, really benefit me and not and it's going to be bad for other human beings, right? Like laundering money for the calls, not good for other human beings. It's just not. Yeah, I made millions upon millions of dollars, but so what? You know how many
I wish,
people
are you,
were hurt in that process? I hear people say, oh, well, you're just laundering money. That doesn't hurt anybody. How do people get their money? It's not like selling flowers. So, kombucha, by the way.
issues that have happened in the United States, we've seen a trend of men, young boys having a hard time with women, because here in the US, it seems like women just go after how much money do you have in your bank account, and are you this 6 foot tall, tall, dark, and handsome. And Cheyenne and I talk about it a lot, where this whole toxic masculinity has spread across the US, and men are just having a really hard time finding their partners anymore because of women wanting to take this more independent stance, and they don't need you to pay for the bill or anything. So it's nice to hear you say that, because maybe if any young men or boys are watching, if you just be yourself, that's not a bad thing. That is not a bad thing at all. And that's awesome how you mentioned that. I give you kudos for that. I think more people need to actually say that. So you went to Stanford Law. Was law always the plan, or were you chasing something else?
No, definitely was not always the plan. I was more interested in pissing off my parents.
Okay. I think aren't we all?
Right. I think we all are. No, that was never the intention, right? The intention was just to be successful. And to me, what success meant was money. Back then, if someone would have said what success means, it was just money. It wasn't having a good marriage. It wasn't being a good father. In fact, I had no desire to ever have children, ever. And even my first 5 years into sobriety, I had no desire to have kids. But then I met my wife, and she had 2 kids who I've adopted since. I've never used the word step in front of, and because to me, they're my children. But thanks, Cheyenne. It's funny. I joke with my wife, I'm a great dad and a shitty husband. I'm just, I'm just, I'm a great dad. I could be a much better husband.
I have 2 kids from a previous, and Cheyenne's man had kids from a previous. So it's hard. My dad had told me, my stepfather, and I always called him my father, but he had told me once, the hardest thing ever was for me to raise someone else's kid, because in their eyes, just when they're younger, when I got older, I understood more. But when when we were young, you're like, you're not my dad. Don't tell me this. Don't tell me that. So that's awesome to hear that you say that you've never used that step with them. So now, do you guys have children together though?
No.
Oh,
no.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I just have my two kids. So yeah, there was no desire to have kids until I met her, and I was like, oh, these kids are amazing. And I want to be part of their lives, and I want to watch them grow as people. And now both of them refer to me as, they don't call me dad, they call me by my first name, Rahul, but both have said very clearly, listen, to us, you're our dad. We just feel weird saying dad. And I'm like, you call me whatever you want. My daughter does these really cute things. She can't say, or she won't say I love you directly, but she'll leave these notes where she calls me Bob. I don't know why Bob, but I guess I look like a Bob.
Oh, that's awesome though.
She'll send me these put these little cute notes. It says, Bob, I wish you have a great trip. I love you. So it's sweet and cute, and I love it.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations, because it sounds like you've definitely got the family of your dreams. Since you weren't planning on one, you really got lucky with what you have. That's awesome.
I really did. I'm very grateful.
So now you got into tech. Now, I read that you had sold your first company to Google for 10 million. How did that happen? For anybody out there
that was very interesting. That was an interesting story, right? So while I'm in school, in law school, we are looking at everyone in Silicon Valley has this entrepreneurship fever, and everyone wants to go work for a startup, or everyone wants to be a startup. And so what I did was, I'm like, I got to know Google's lawyers, right? And then I specifically got to know Google's lawyers in the acquisition team. And I was like, let me understand what allows you to acquire a company. Why do you acquire a company? And they said, we acquire 2 types of companies. One, companies that threaten us or piss us off, or two, technology that we can use, right? And I said, well, like, what would piss you off? And so this guy like rattles off a variety of companies that he had acquired. And I said, well, like, for how much? And he starts listing price, like 2 million, 5 million, 30 million, 10 million, 20. And so in my, like, remember, the way that my brain works is like, what's the fastest path to money? Not what's the most ethical, not what's the like most where I'm going to really benefit society. I don't give a flying fuck about society. I care about getting mine and like, right. So one of the things he says to me is like, oh, you're not going to believe this story. We met this arrogant lawyer from Yale, right? They hated Yale lawyers because they were all Stanford lawyers. This arrogant lawyer who he represented a company and they hacked our algorithm. And they hacked our algorithm. And I said, well, how does someone hack your algorithm? He's like, oh, well, you know, sometimes developers leave tells, but we just educated our developers and to change these tells. And I was like, but you didn't fire the developers or like put them on new teams? And he was like, no, and we didn't see the point. I was like, oh, okay. So then I figured out who the developers were, right? So this was a process, but I started, because I figured they were all Stanford engineers, right? So I went and like figured out who the original, the developers or from Google were. And they had all gone to Stanford. And so then I went and literally hired like 6 escorts. And I'm like, you're going to go and you're going to sleep with these boring ass engineers, these
oh my God,
Google engineers. And when you're at their houses, you're going to get as many login credentials as possible. They're like, how are we going to do it? I'm like, you're going to use GHB. I'll give you the GHB. Just use whatever you need to get these guys like high and drunk and turn over information. So that's what they did. Like these girls went and slept with these dudes. And then I kept paying them. And by the way, I had raised money. Like I had raised money for a business. And the way I raised the money was my dad, one of the things that he taught my brother and I how to do, he taught us how to trade the currency markets when we were kids. So the way I raised all the money for my first business was that I took money that I had saved and turned it into $1 million trading Forex. And then I just funneled, like that's how I paid for all this. So I figure out who all the engineers are. I get a lot of their like login credentials. I then go hire my own team of engineers, and we basically found the holes in Google's algorithms, right?
Wow. Oh
so then
I'm over here in shock. I'm trying to soak this up because this is like a movie.
So then what we do is after we figure out the holes in their algorithm, I start putting people on the first page of Google in like hours. So this is what the problem with their algorithm was. They had the same development team that was working on their algorithm. They weren't using two-factor authentication. This was back in like 2010, 11 timeframe. The two-factor authentication didn't exist, and they had hubris. This was, remember that in 2010, 2011, Google was the most arrogant company in Silicon Valley. They were like gods. And like, who would be stupid enough to go after Google, right? I was. And so their development team had tells in their code. Their code had tells. And any good developer will tell you, yeah, you can know who wrote this code. If you have certain pieces of information, you can look for weak points. And so I was starting to get these companies on the first page of Google in hours and minutes, really. And people were paying me $60,000, $70,000 a month to do it. So I have this flourishing business, and I'm like, I'm never selling this. And then I start getting cease and desist. Now, what I had done, because I was in law school, I knew, and I use this when laundering money, I had set up multiple corporations. So Google would look and they'd say, okay, we'll send a cease and desist to this corporation. And then it would be forwarded to another. And I'd shut one corporation down, open up another. Well, finally, after their like 9th cease and desist, I go and talk to this attorney who's a general counsel at Google, who's the general counsel at Google, not there anymore, but I'm like, hey, listen, what would you do? What would you give me if I told you that I knew who that company was and I told the original name? And his eyes light up and he's like, yeah, we really want to shut them down. I said, well, if I can arrange a meeting, how much will you buy them for? And he's like, probably no more than 20 million. I said, all right, let me arrange a meeting. And so I arrange a meeting, right? And I walk in. I walk into this meeting and he's like, where's the company? I'm like, I'm the company. He almost lost it. I mean, he threw his cell phone across the room. He's like, and every racist, angry Asian guy, right? So every expletive that could come out of this guy's mouth, he was livid. You mother, you took advantage of our relation, blah, like all this stuff. And I was like, yeah, yeah, I did. So anyways, I'd like that 20 million now. And he's like, fuck you, I'm not giving you shit. I was like, okay, cool. I will sell this Yahoo. Because in 2010, 11, Yahoo was still and I'm like, well, it's fine. I'll have Yahoo's attorneys backing me. And they'll own your code. And so I said, listen, you can give me the 20 million. And so we then negotiated. And we settled on 10. And that instantly to the cash moving to where Google has done things to people, right? They have enough power and money that they can have people disappear, and they have. Now they'll never admit it. They will say that's slander. They'll say a lot of things. So but there's enough documented cases of people disappearing who were. I mean, look at this. The most recent whistleblower on the most recent AI whistleblowers who just magically died, like randomly committed suicide when they were living happy lives, right? Anyway, so yeah, he was. But what was really funny is I went out for drinks with this attorney afterwards, a general counsel. And he says, you know what? I am still very angry, but you got us. Congratulations! Like you played us like a fiddle. You good on you. He's like, I'll make sure you're burned in Silicon Valley and can never work here again. But I guess you don't. It doesn't matter because you're going to retire. So
I have to ask a question here. This is an amazing story. Okay, so at any point when all of this was going down, especially you'd gotten these escorts, they were going in there, they were stealing code. At any point, did you have a moment of, holy shit, I need to stop doing this immediately? Or you were just like, we're going for this because I'm going to make this successful because my eye's on the prize?
Yeah, never. Not once was I like, this is a bad idea. Not one time.
I give you so much credit for that gusto. I was a manager at Hollywood Video, and when rude customers would say, I want to speak to the manager, I would do this thing where I would say, 1 minute, and I would walk away and I'd come back and I'd say, you requested a manager? And that would terrify me to do that. So the fact that you walked into a meeting after saying to this guy, I can get you a meeting with the guy, but then you're the guy.
Yeah.
Dude, Rahul, you have some balls. I have mad respect for you. If anyone out there needs someone to talk to get that spine
please.
to do things like that, you just gave me even a new sense of strength, because if you don't take charge of your own life like that, then you're never going to get what you want.
No, never.
So
no, you have to take like you have to control what I have come to realize is life is very short, very, very short. And nobody gives a fuck, right? Like people about you other than you, right? So, and what do I mean by that? Not that the world's cold. The world's not. I don't think the world is cold, but like most people are thinking, what are they going to think? That is a thought that goes through many, many, many people's. What are they going to think?
Yep.
They don't give a fuck about you. They're not thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves, right? Like people are like, what's that lawyer going to think about you? Who cares? Who cares what he's thinking about me? Really? Does it really matter what other people are thinking about you? No, it does not.
Right. Well, my mom and dad used to always say, if they don't pay your bills, then pay them no mind.
Yeah,
because they, and
that's great.
right here in, America, the media wants us to think we're so divisive. I don't think we're so divided as they portray, but we've seen a lot of people be suppressed the last couple years. And I think with,
Sure.
this show, Cheyenne and I have decided that that's what we're having this show for, is to at least try to get people some information from other successful people or people that have been at rock bottom and have redeemed themselves, to show you that it can happen. So when did you cross the line into illegal territory? Was there a
So
moment where you thought, I need to stop?
that's a good question. So in 2012, end of 2012, my ex-wife, who is truly like one of the kindest, most generous human beings, I have nothing negative to say about her. She put up with hell. I was such a shitbag husband. I was a terrible husband. I was a terrible person and a terrible husband, right? Like, I did everything a husband should never do. I was never faithful. I was just a terrible person. I was never physically violent. And maybe that's the only thing I could get credit for, is I was never physically violent, but I was emotionally abusive. I was just a dirtbag. And it all stemmed from alcohol and drugs. Like, it all came from that. And so in 2012, after years of this nightmare, she's like, honey, get sober or I'm leaving. Like, and so it was the first time I'd ever done anything really honest in my whole life. And I went to her and I said, Katie, I don't think I can stop drinking. Like, I think you need to leave. And,
oh, wow.
And she did, right? She left. And I'm glad she left, because it always gets worse before it gets better. And so she leaves, and I thought, oh, I'm free, right? I'm free to go be the dirtbag I was being behind closed doors. And so, but it was truly like emotionally devastating. Because we were together 10 years, right? We dated for 3 years and we were married for 7. And so what did I decide to do? I decided to do what any like good alcoholic cocaine addict should do, is I bought a motorcycle that I didn't know how to drive. I didn't know how to ride a motorcycle. And I got a motorcycle, and I rode down to South America, right? So I ride all the way from California all the way down to Colombia, and I crashed probably 10 times along the way, and it was just nuts, right? So that's what I did. And the fascinating part was, I was crazy. Like, it's a miracle I didn't die. I was kicked out of the nation of Venezuela. The country of Venezuela said, never come back. Now, if you know anything about Venezuela, you've done something obviously very bad for that country to kick you out.
I was just going to say.
Right. I paid a big bribe to get out of prison. I was arrested. I was in prison in Colombia. I was in prison in Venezuela. I was in prison in Mexico. Like, I went to jail, all those places, for some drunken, disorderly behavior, and paid bribes to get out of those places, right? While I'm in Colombia, I make contacts with these people who, to me, they just told me they were very successful business owners. Now, I wasn't a moron. I knew what they did. And they said, we need help getting our money into the US market and out of the US market. And I was like, oh, I can help you with that. Now, I didn't know anything about laundering money. Like, I knew nothing about laundering money, nothing. But I'm like, well, I'll figure it out. And so they asked me, they're like, well, do you know how to do this? I'm like, I'm an expert in this. And they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And then I just literally they were like, well, how would you do it? And so I just thought about it for a second, right? With what I knew about international law and what I knew about Interpol. And I said, well, this is what you would do. You set up at least 1,500 corporations across multiple jurisdictions. You move the money from Interpol jurisdiction to non-Interpol to Interpol to non-Interpol. They can't track it fast enough. If you look at crimes that happen in the US, sometimes things that criminals will do is they will go to places like Los Angeles, where within one county are 14 different agencies, police agencies, right? Because Glendale has an agency, and Diamond Bar has an agency. They all have agencies. And these police departments all have egos. They don't talk to each other. So someone will commit a crime in Glendale and in Oakhurst, and these agencies don't talk. Well, if you think it's on a local level, it's bad, imagine what it's like on an international level. And so I just explained this to this guy sitting here at a bar one day having a drink. And then I give him my number and I leave. And it was like, okay, well, I don't know, 3 days later, I get a call and they're like, can you come into our office and explain this to us? Well, I'm wearing like clothes like this because I didn't bring nice clothes on this motorcycle trip. And it was one of the nicest offices I've ever been in Colombia. Like in Bogota, it overlooked, it was in the district that overlooked the US Embassy. It was gorgeous. And I look like I'm homeless. And so I like walk in and
Dude,
first of all, the receptionist is like, where's your package? I'm like, what package? I don't have a package. She's like, well, aren't you delivering something here? You're with a helmet. And I'm like, and I'm like, no, I'm here to see so-and-so. And they're like, no, you're not. And I said, I am, but she's like, get out of our office. I'm calling security. So I was like, yeah, I'll leave. And so I'm leaving. And the guy I'm meeting is coming up the elevator, right? And he's like, where are you going? I'm like, I was told by your receptionist to leave. And he was like, so he's like, let's go. And he fired her. He was like, he's here to see me. You're fired. Yeah, I was like, you don't need to fire her. I mean, look at me. I look homeless. And he laughed. He's like, all right, I'll give you one more chance. But he's here for us. Never do that again. I mean, and so it was a very interesting kind of experience. And so I go in and I meet this room full of guys. And they're like explain you're hired. And I was like, for what? I'm hired for what? And hold on, my dad. Hold on 1 second. My dad, what do you need?
I believe he's taking a call, everyone, so we'll just give him a few minutes. But wow, what a story so far. If you've never had the gall to do something, man, really put your boots on, strap on, and just go. I mean, be a man, be an independent woman, and go and fulfill your dreams. Of course, make sure they're all legal and everything. We're not promoting.
Sorry, everybody. My dad is. So, anyways, everything's fine. My dad's fine.
Are you sure everything okay?
Yeah, everyone's fine.
Okay.
So I'm like, well, what am I hired for, right? And they explain what they need, and I'm like, yeah, I could do that. Now, they needed me to clean like $100 million a year, right? And I'm like, no, I can do that. No, it's no problem. And they're like, what kind of budget do you need, and how do we pay you? And so I'm like, well, let me see what you've been doing in the past. And then we don't want to show you that. I'm like, listen, this is how I work. But by the way, I'm making all this up as I go. I have no idea. And so I was like,
you must have watched a lot of good movies.
I want to see. No, it wasn't bad though. To me, it was like more. It was more of common sense. It was more of like, if you look at this from a business perspective, you know what their past results are. You know what the future results are going to be, and you know that if you can clean more, clean less, you should get. So what I said is, I want to be paid a percentage of the delta, right? If I clean, and so he was shocked, right? He was like, wait, let me understand this. You want to get 3% of the delta. Well, what if the delta is only 2 million? I said, well, then I'll only get 3% of 2 million. They're like hired, right? Because what the other guys were taking was like 20 million a year. And so I then just started to do this, and it took me about 6 months, and they weren't happy about that, but it took me 6 months to set up the entire infrastructure. And then I just started to move it. It was all done electronically, and I was cleaning almost $1 billion a year. Well, imagine my delta is a little bit higher now. Right.
So you set yourself up good then with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So then life goes on like that for like not long, right? A couple of years, 2, 3 years, 4 years or so. It goes on, and I'm living like a king. But I'm starting to hate myself more and more. The more I do this stuff, and the more alcohol I consume, and now there's no life is off the rails. I'm spending a lot of time in Colombia and Ecuador and all over the world, just not the U.S. And I'm using more, and I'm seeing a lot of prostitutes. I'm just like, I have girlfriends, like, yeah, right. They don't give a shit about you. They care about the money, all over the world. And I hate myself. And what I start realizing is in this time, I start going to therapy, and the therapist says, listen, you can't really address this unless you stop drinking and using drugs. And I'm like, well, there's no fucking way I'm doing that. Because that was the only thing that kept me sane. I mean, the only thing, because if I stopped using drugs and drinking, I would not have been able to clean all that money. I would have been able to like consciously see what you are doing is hurting millions of people, really fundamentally hurting a lot of people. And so I had to keep using to numb out the consciousness in me that said, this is wrong and you should not be doing this. Use these God-given skills for something to benefit humanity, not do this, right? And so that keeps going. And then one day in 2015, December 19th, 2015 is my sobriety date. But December 18th, I'm back in California. I get into a very serious car accident where I totaled a car of my employee because she did, I don't even know what she did, but she did something that pissed me off. I was in a blackout, totaled her car, evaded law enforcement, and got home, right? And I still remember, like I had enough clarity where I wake up the next morning sober-ish, and I go for the bottle, and I'm like, before I drink the bottle, let me just go to the bathroom. And I don't know what happened, but I look at myself in the mirror, and it was the first time since that time in 2012 when I had an honest conversation with my wife, where I looked in the mirror and I asked God for help. And I said, God, kill me or get me sober, but I cannot live this way anymore. And in that moment, like it was instant, the desire to drink left, and this voice came, and it wasn't my voice and it wasn't the alcohol, but it was a voice, and it said, go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting right now. And so I did. I just like looked at where the closest one was going on, and I went. And that's when the journey sort of started. I don't know what the guy said who was speaking. I have no idea, but I knew something in my soul said, go talk to him before he sits down. So he's walking back from sharing something. And I go and I say, listen, I want you to sponsor me. I'm running a massive illegal business. I'm a raging alcoholic, a drug addict. I need your help. His name was Bill V. If Bill was a federal agent, I was going to prison that day, right? But Bill wasn't. He was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he said, just wait afterwards and I'll talk to you. And so he sponsored me. And I remember him saying to me, hey, listen, you should probably get out of doing these things. Like you should probably leave. And I was like, I have an exit strategy. I'll be fine, right? Just to help me get sober. And so I stayed sober. 6 months in, or 4 months in, I'm like, Bill, I'm still doing this illegal business. He's like, yeah, no shit. You still have a Ferrari. Of course you're still doing the illegal business. People don't have Ferraris who have no money, right? And so he said, you need to turn yourself into the FBI. I said, because I can't just get out of it. Like I can't just call my bosses and be like, hey, peace out. This is fun. I got really rich. I'm cool now. He said, turn yourself into the FBI. And I said, are you high? I'm a lawyer. Like, I know what that means. And he's like, well, do you want to be killed and your family to be killed? And I said, okay. So I go to the FBI office in San Francisco and I turn myself in. And they look at me and they look at my background and they're like, because I had done such a good job of like declaring my income. And they're like, you're just a tech millionaire. You're not like, what do you get out of here? Don't fuck with us. This isn't funny. We're busy, right? One of the detectives at the time, who I wouldn't say I'm friends with, but I keep in touch with, right? And he was like, something's different, like something's serious about this guy. He's not just fucking with us. So he does starts an investigation and looks and couldn't find much, but kept going. And sure enough, found it, like found a thread that opened it all up. And 2 months after that, 9 federal agencies kicked my front door down. And like, it was like the movies, right? Like that door it went in and then it came down and went out, right? And as they're like searching the house, looking for drugs and guns, they were sure that there was gonna be a lot of drugs and guns. There was no drugs or guns, just a lot of cash everywhere. Like I think I had 1.4 million in cash, like hundreds all over the house. And I have this huge smile I'm in handcuffs. I have this huge smile on my face. And he's like, why are you smiling? Do you realize how much trouble you're in? By the way, I'm sober, right? I'm 6 months sober at this point. Haven't had a drink or a drug in 6 months. And I said, because it's finally over. It's finally over. Like I can breathe. This is over. I'm a bad asset. I'm a burned asset. They're going to visit me in jail. I already know it. They're going to visit me in jail. And they're going to say, if you reveal any information, we'll kill you and your family. And I was going to, and then I negotiated with them. I said, listen, I got to give them something. And so I said, I'll give them the structure because you guys can duplicate the structure. And so the FBI wanted something. I gave them no names. And the other thing I had done is I had built my laptop in a way that once somebody tried to access it more than one time, it was burned. So I was very good at putting my password in correctly. Because if you gave it one time, what it did was it burned the laptop. It looked like it was fine. It would open with a bad password. It would open the laptop, but it would send messages out to all bank accounts to disperse funds immediately, right? To make sure that my clients they didn't lose any money, right? And then shut those accounts down. It would start the process of shutting the accounts down and burning them. Which is what happened because the FBI, the guy was like, what's your password? And I gave him the wrong password. It opened, but everything. And so I knew they were fine, that they lost no money. So it was like and at no point did I ever think, like after I turned myself in is when I did all of that stuff because I knew that one day they would come. One day they would come and one day this would be over. And part of the reason I knew that is I started to develop this faith in a higher power. Right? Like, and to me, God is consciousness. And I had developed this faith in consciousness. And I knew one day these guys would come and one day this would be over. I just didn't know what that day would be. And so I just built the systems for it, right? Pre going and turning myself in, I didn't have any of those systems built. So if they would have come, I would have been really fucked, but that's not what happened. So then to me, that's when the journey really starts. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah,
No. I didn't want to interrupt you. I want questions as you go along because since this is real life and this really happened and I'm just like jaw dropped. So even though you went into the FBI to try to turn yourself in, did they kick down your door as a way to kind of almost protect you in a sense that it wasn't like you went to try to give them? I mean, I'm talking about so the cartels wouldn't hurt you. Is that why they did that?
I don't think so. Like, I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. So it's just their standard thing they do.
I think they just enjoy it, right? Like these cops they need to have some fun in their jobs also.
True. Yeah.
So,
yeah. I just didn't know how they were. Did they
I don't know.
Like,
they always saw me, like even in court, they saw me as like an arrogant, manipulative asshole. That's how they saw me. And I think they just saw me that way because they were like, this, like, who does this? Like, why would somebody, he didn't need to do this, right? It wasn't like there was a need for this. This guy did this because he thought he was smarter than all of us, right? And
Right.
they believe that this detective, when I called him and said, hey, thank you for arresting me on my every sobriety birthday, I've called him, and it was just this last one, 9 years sober. This last one, he said, I think you've really changed. Dude, I've been sober for 9 years. And he's like, yeah, I think you're actually on the road to change.
So did they offer you protection, Raul,
No,
through this whole thing?
no, they wanted to be, they would have been happy with me getting shot.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they had no interest. I mean, what ends up happening. So now I find myself in this place of like gratitude, right? And it's weird because I have now had every single asset, both legal and illegal, frozen. Okay. So every asset I have is frozen. And most people think, well, it's a RICO Act or it's this. No, the way the US government works, many people don't understand this, but the US government has a lot of power and they don't need laws to do things. Many of the things, especially the state of California does, are illegal. And so they break laws all the time. And nobody has the power or the money unless you have millions of dollars somewhere outside their purview to pay for lawyers to fight back. So they just froze all my assets, legal, illegal. They just froze all of them. And then, and so now I'm home. Like I have no money. I have no car. Everything's been taken. But at the same time, I was still very active in AA and I was sponsoring and I was going to meetings and I was very active. And so I start fighting this case and I need money for a lawyer, right? Well, the lawyer that I needed was about $500,000 retainer and then another $500,000. And so I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't have that. And out of nowhere, and it wasn't a cartel because I've gone and checked, but this guy in AA who had been following my story and my life, who I didn't know he was as wealthy as he was, but he said, I'm going to pay your attorney fee. I was like, what? Yeah, he said, I'm going to pay your attorney fee. And he's like, wow. You just can't tell people who it was, but I'm going to pay for your attorney. My request is you keep staying sober and you keep helping people, and I'll do everything I can to help you. And I was like, okay. And then somebody said, hey, come and I have an extra, this in Silicon Valley, one of the most expensive places on the planet. I have a guest house that I just store my Christmas ornaments in. You can stay in that. And then somebody else was like, hey, I was going to donate this 2001 Lexus to Goodwill, but I'll sell it to you. But for tax reasons, I got to sell it for something. So give me $10 for it. Like in short order, all these things just show up, right? And then a guy in AA was like, hey, listen, you need a job. Like you need to get a real job that you get a W-2 at. And we have a no felon policy, but you haven't been convicted yet. So I'm going to give you a job in my company, right? And so I get a job, making $80,000 a year doing legal analysis work, right? And so all these things show up. And when people ask me like, well, how does that help me, a guy who's struggling? Well, my response is always go build a big fucking community around you, right? I went to AA, and there are a lot of things about AA I didn't like and agree with. But one of the things I did like and agree with, there were good people there. And I didn't have to agree with the steps and the higher, like I didn't have to agree with some of the things, but I agreed that these were good people that wanted to help other people. And I went and I very authentically opened my heart to what was going on all the time. I was honest about the fact that I kept running the business. And what happened were some people were really turned off and they walked away, but others were very attracted to the honesty and they wanted to help me, right? And I wanted to change and I wanted to help me also, right? So when it wasn't like things were just thrown at me, I had to go and ask people. And it was very humbling to go and ask the guy who mentioned in a meeting that he was going to donate his Lexus, 2001 Lexus, to say, hey, instead of donating it, can I buy it? I only have $30. That was humbling, right? But I did it. Why? Because what choice did I have? Was I going to walk? No, I'm skinny, not because I work out. I do work out a lot, but because genetically I'm skinny, right? But or a job, right? This guy, I knew that he was hiring. He didn't just come and say, "Here's a job," but I asked. I said, "Hey, Frank, can I work for your company?" Well, Rahul, I mean, you're kind of in the middle of this very ugly case. I said, but I haven't been convicted of these felonies. A community and build the community before life sucks. Like, build the community when life is good, so that when life gets hard, you have a community to fall back on.
Might I make a little little comment? You had said that you were honest, and look, you went back to where you were as you were when you were a teen, of what you thought didn't, gather good things around you. You ended up becoming honest and telling everybody, in that AA, I'm still doing the business. And look what happened. God sent the right people around you. So it's just weird that you you deterred off that path a little of doing dishonest things. And
Sure.
then look, it came back again later in life. I think that's a beautiful thing. So what happened from there then?
Yeah. So then, life really got interesting. So I'm now, like, I now have $800 in savings or something. And and I continue to go to AA, and I'm like, I start fighting this case with a good lawyer. And after 8 months, or after a year of fighting this case, finally going to court the final time. And every single member, like 70 members of AA, came with me to every court appearance. The court was packed, right? And then people were like, "Who is this guy? Celebrity? Like, who is this dude?" And the final one. Now, I didn't know people were doing this. I had no idea. I didn't solicit it. The final one, this judge stands up. He says, "All right, listen. I have been on this bench for 45 years." He's holding up this stack of papers, right? And he said, "In my 45 years on the bench, I've never seen someone get this kind of support." And it was letters from people in the community saying, "Please don't send him to prison. He's helping a lot of people. Please don't send this guy to prison." And he said, "Listen, I have to send you to prison. I mean, you laundered a lot of money and did a lot of illegal things, but I don't have to send you to prison for 32 years, which is what the state mandates for the amount of money you laundered. But I'm going to send you to prison for 18 months. When do you want to go?" Right? And I said,
"Oh my gosh. So wait a minute, you get $1 million. Wait a minute. So you get a year for each $1 million you launder?"
"Yeah."
And you only got 18 months? Blessed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, yeah. So when, and then he says, "When do you want to go?" And I said, "Well, how about February, so I can go through the holidays with my AA family." And so I start. So now, like, the real journey, I think, for me was in jail. I mean, a lot of this life was journey, but this was a different type of journey. So I remember I walk into jail, right? My friends in AA threw me a Rahul's going to jail party. It was actually a lot of fun. We had AA speakers fly in. It was a fun, like, event, right? And then that same group of 70 people take me and drop me off at jail. And I remember, like, walking in jail, and I don't know what jails are like in other parts of the country, but in the way they were in California, and I did my state time in a county jail, a lot of people were like, "You should have done your state time in a state prison, because county jails are horrible." And they are much worse than state prisons, much worse. So they're more dangerous. There's a lot of things bad about them. I didn't know that. So, but the way they are is, you walk into a county jail, and it's like this space, maybe a little bit bigger, than this space behind me, but it's packed with 200 guys. Okay, so imagine this space packed with 200 guys. And the bunk beds are 3 tall, right? Because they're overcrowded. So they have these bunk beds that are 3 tall, three high, and guys fall off all the time, go to the hospital. Like, it's not pretty. And then they have an area in the middle. So imagine like where my desk is, and see that wall, and like they have 3 tables. And those 3 tables, 3 metal tables with metal benches. Those 3 metal tables, only one of those metal tables, all the races can sit at. Other times where there's no war is going to start, but the other 2 benches are single race benches. So if there's a white guy there, he can only be there for 2 hours before a black or a Latino is going to come and say, you got to move. And so like, that's how it is. So I remember calling my sponsor, and by the way, no Indians are in county jails in California. They're all like doing legal things like being engineers. And so I call my sponsor, and I'm like, hey, Bill, how do I survive in here? Because you got Raj in one corner getting his ass kicked and Kumar in the other corner with the same fate. And I was not ready to be Kumar or Raj, right? It wasn't my jam. And so I call my sponsor, and I'm like, Bill, how do I survive? And he was like, be of service, trust God. And he hangs up on me. I'm like, that is terrible fucking advice, bro. Like, that's your advice? Be of service, trust God. And so I start to do the only thing I need to do is I went to the only all races table, and I start reading a big book of AA. And I don't talk to anybody, and I just read this book, and I write all day, write all day, read this book. Very quickly, in short order, a few days, people start coming. And within like a month, we have a meeting of all the races. And then what I notice is like certain guys they never read. They're like, oh, you read for me. And so I like approach them, and the white guys, black guys. And I was the only one that could talk to all the races without needing a chaperone, because it was a very like ordered race-based system. And so I start asking, I'm like, hey, do you need help reading? Like, there's no shame in not being able to read. Like, do you need, yeah, man, I can't read. But it's cool. I don't need to read. I'm like, well, if you want to read, I'm starting a reading class. And so like guys, and then one of the things I did was, because the gang leaders in there don't want people educated. They don't want people to read, right? They want people they can control. And so I was like, how do I manipulate a gang leader into getting his guys to want to read? And I was like, listen, when your baby mama sends you like really erotic notes, do you really want me to read them to you? Like, wouldn't you just rather be able to read them yourself? He's like, yeah, man, I never thought of that, but yeah, that'd be great. I was like, well, why don't we get you to like read so that you can do that? Oh yeah. And don't you want your guys to like not have you in their business? And he was like, yeah. So that was how like the mentality I used to get them to. And so now we're starting to teach that. I intentionally taught the gang leaders in each unit so that when a lower member was learning to read, he wasn't going to get bullied, because if he did, then he'd have to answer to the gang leader, which would have been really bad for him. And so before we know it, we have a reading class going and a writing class going. And I'm a fundamental believer in education, right? And the reason one of the ways this all came out is I remember talking to my mom early on, and she said, listen, I don't know how you're going to repay your father and I for like the emotional damage you've done to us. But one of the places you can start is, if you want to be of service in there and you want to help be like, say, want me to be proud of you in that place, give away the education that was so freely given to you. And the truth is, I happened to be born into a good family that valued education. By some luck of God, that's right. I didn't earn where I was born into at all. I was just born there. And so we start reading classes and we start writing classes. And then it was members of AA who forced the hand of the jail to bring a GED program in to the unit, right? And so now we've got a GED program. And then one of the miracle was the unit automatically went dry. So most people don't know this, but it is very hard for guys who are trying to get sober in jail, because there's a huge amount of alcohol and drugs that's made in there. Like they make alcohol from bread and fruit. I didn't even know that could be done until I was there, and I was like, this is fucking crazy. Like they make alcohol from weird stuff, and then they drink it, which is gross. Like there are guys that eat yogurt and cheese, and I'm like, this is twisted, bro. And then eating it, right, and not dying.
And there's a lot of people, they get the drugs smuggled in there. They get the dirty cops and everything too. Yeah.
Places that you don't like. I'm like, do you know where that was? I don't care.
Exactly.
It's I don't care. It's heroin. So, or fentanyl. There's a lot of fentanyl now. A lot of people dying from fentanyl in California jails. So we started doing these things, and then we started this prison poetry project in there, where what I realized, because I used to love poetry, I still do. But I realized that guys could express themselves differently with poetry. And so we started a prison poetry project, and everyone in the unit, like of the 200 in the unit, 50 were actively weekly doing poetry. And we had a teacher in Santa Clara University who was a poetry teacher, and she made it a project for her classes where these inmates, all the inmates would send the poetry. I would get it. I would send it all out to a P.O. box in Santa Clara. She would then give it to her students, and they would leave good, positive, encouraging feedback and send it all back. It was the first time that many of these men in their lives got encouraging feedback for their work. And you started seeing people change, like, oh, this education thing can actually do something for me. Like I could get feedback that's not negative or not based on violence or not based on, drugs. And so then I thought, well, how else can we change this attitude? And by the way, I'm doing all this in prison. I'm with the, I'm in the shit box. And then, I still remember. So we were doing all these things. One day I'm sitting at this all races table and there's a new guy in the unit, and he's a former gang leader in the Aryan race, the Aryan nation, or whatever the hell they call themselves in prison. But
the Aryan Brotherhood,
right? And so, and the leader in there was a leader that demoted this guy. And the way that you demoted or not is through fighting, right? Like, do you win the bloody battle? And apparently the guy who was in there won the bloody battle twice, and this guy was demoted. So the first thing this guy wants to do when he comes in is like prove that he's still a man in his eyes. So how does he do it? He's like, I'm going to pick on a black guy and an Indian guy. But he doesn't know that this unit is different. So before anyone in the white group could have stopped him, because when they saw that he had come in, and it was already too late because of what he had done. But I was sitting at the table where the door is, where they let inmates come in. So he walks in, and the first thing he says is, I don't think an N-word and an SN should be sitting at this table. I'm like, cool, peace out. I get up and walk away. Well, the black guy was like, I have a problem with that. And they fight, right? Well, the fight escalates now into a race war, and then the Latinos get involved, and it's a disaster. And the cops were happy as hell. Like, they were like, we can use our toys. So they launched 2 tear gas canisters into a closed unit like this, where there's no ventilation. And then that didn't get it. They waited literally 13th of a second, and they're like, but people haven't stopped fighting yet. So they dropped these like metal slacks down. Assume you haven't. It hurts badly. So like I was under the bunk praying by this point. I'm like, all right, God, if not, this is the time I'm going to die from a major asthma attack. At least it was a good wife, and I got shot. Right? So, and I'm like, it's okay, you can talk to me. What is it? And he very like a lot of things, but yes was not one of them. And the words that came out of my mouth were, yes, I would love to help you read. And I think it's because in AA, I learned that if I'm the only hand to help somebody in a horrible place, then my hand is the one that will help. And so, so I started teaching this guy how to read. And I remember one day, this was like right before COVID. So he says to me, Rahul, I don't know why I hate. I don't know why I hate. I've been in and out of prisons my whole life, and I was adopted by the whites. And so like, I hate, but I don't know why. I said, it's all right, man. You don't need to know why you hate. You just don't have to hate today. And that's all right. So let's get back to work. Right. And then COVID comes, and then I start getting really sick, like really sick. And I still remember it was March 3rd, 2020. And I wake up that day, and I know that I'm going to die that day. I knew that this was the day I was going to die. And I had put in requests for the doctor over and over again and ignored. Many people die in California's jail system. Many, many die because they don't want you to live, right? They would deny it, but you just look at the numbers of inmates that die in custody, and that system, Santa Clara County system, is significantly higher than other systems, significantly higher by a factor of like 15, right? And so, so I go to the doctor a final time. I have a temperature of 106.1. It's a miracle that I was still like, I'm in a wheelchair, and my blood alcohol level was 0, but my blood oxygen level was 72%, right? It's supposed to be 95, right? And so I'm dying. And as the doctor looks at me and says, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. I'm like, you can't give me Advil or anything? No, there's nothing we can do. As I'm being rolled back by the guard, he says, Athavale, and he hands me his phone. He said, listen, you're going to die in here. I know you have a lot of friends out there. Call one that can help you. And he's like, I'm not supposed to do this. I'm going to take you outside. Okay. I'm going to take you outside where there's reception. And I'm going to tell the other guard on staff that you're a trustee and that you have this privilege. And if they ask you, you're going to say yes. Understand? I said, yeah. So I call a friend who's a federal prosecutor, who happens to be living in San Francisco. And I called him, and he said, and he never picks up calls he doesn't know, but he picked up this call, and he said, what's wrong, Rahul? I said, listen, I'm using a guard's cell phone, and I'm going to die today. I already know it. I said, I have 106 fever. I have a 75% blood oxygen rate, and they're not helping me. He's like, I'll be there. And he hangs up the phone. And then he somehow makes it from San Francisco to San Jose in like 30 minutes, which is a miracle. That was a miracle. And he gets there, and he walks into the prison, and he like sees me, it meets me as my lawyer and sees me, and then says to the guard, you call an ambulance right now. And they're like, no. He's like, okay, listen, I'm going to make this really easy for you. And he shows his badge. I'm with the federal prosecutor's office. I'm launching an investigation right now into this jail. And I'm going to call Channel 5 News. They're going to be here. We're going to talk about how you let inmates die in custody. And so he gets on and I'm there listening to this. He calls a contact at Channel 5, and she says, and he puts her on speaker, and he said, listen, I want you to come to Elmwood right now. We're doing a story on how they're intentionally killing inmates in prison. This I've never seen a sergeant lose his. He's okay. Call the ambulance. Call. And get the ambulance here faster. Give it a police. We don't need this. So the ambulance comes and they pick me up, and he's holding my hand in the ambulance, gets in the ambulance with me. The last thing I remember is closed. The last thing I remember is that ambulance is leave, right? So it's I see the wood, right? Like I just died. So those doors close and I die. Or to me, I woke up in this huge room, right? This huge experience. In the ambulance, I had died, and they were shocking my chest. They were doing everything they could to get me to wake up, but I'm dead. And normally what they do with inmates who die in ambulances is they just call it and they're done. Because Peter was there, they're like, you're taking him to the hospital and you're putting him on life support. That's what you're doing. And you're doing it right fucking now. So they go to the hospital, they put me on life support. I'm still dead, right? What I'm experiencing is I feel these like two beings behind me. I wake up in this beautiful room. I can't see a body, but I'm still there. And I feel these like two beings behind me guiding me towards this light. But I didn't know it was a light. But what I felt was every time I would try to go in a different direction, I wasn't dragged back, but I felt less love. I didn't feel fear. I just felt less love. And so I wanted to keep feeling all that love. And so I go to this light, and it's huge light. I mean, it was like the Empire State, but it was massive light. And it was pure love, pure unadulterated love. And all of a sudden this voice, right? This voice comes, and the voice says, do you want to come home or do you want to go back? And I was like, and come home meant stay there, which I intuitively knew. And go back meant go back, right? And I said, if I would have known I was responding to God, I would not be here on this podcast. I would have made a different decision. But I said, well, why would I go back, right? Like, why would anyone go back from this place? And this being or this voice says, you still have a lot of work to do. And you're going to do it in this time or lifetime, or you're going to do it in the next, but you're going to do your work. And that's when I answered, and I actually cursed at God. And I was like, fuck no, I get this shit over with. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go through this again. Let's just get this shit over with. In that moment, I remember being dragged back, like being sucked through this vortex of sorts through to my body. And I don't remember this, but this is what I'm told that Peter said, and what the police officers were said. I went from my brain was dead. I had no brain activity. The only reason I was alive is because I was on life support. I sit straight up, my brain activity flashes back on, and I'm screaming, I made a mistake, send me back. I made a mistake, send me back. I made a mistake, send me back. And then I lay back down exhausted, right? And the doctor was like, I've never seen this in my life. Like you shouldn't be here. We should have pulled your plug 3 days ago. I was like, 3 days? They're like, you've been unconscious in a coma for 3 days. We haven't been able to break your fever. You're still at 106, which makes no sense because you should have broken. My body was septic, right? So my body was septic. I was at 106, and with oxygen being pumped into my body, it was hovering around 80 instead of 95 or 99 where it should be. When I woke back up and I explained what I just experienced, the doctor was like, this is the third time in my entire practice I have experienced this. He's like, I was an atheist before. This is very hardcore. Like, I don't know what you just experienced, but it wasn't your brain because your brain was dead. Like we were recording no brain activity at all. And so then they send me, right? So like, by the way, I wake up and I'm handcuffed because I'm going somewhere. I'm handcuffed to the gurney, right? And the doctor says, listen, you're going to be in this place. You're going to be in prison, in this hospital for at least a month. You're very sick. There's no way you have a 0 white blood cell count. Like there's no way, we don't know why you're alive. You should not be alive. You should be dead. And in a week, my body fully recovered. In those 3 days, I lost like 31 pounds. I had in a week, I fully recovered. My white blood cell counts were back. Everything was back. Like I was fine. And so they say, okay, well, this is like something is very abnormal. None of this makes sense scientifically. None of this makes any sense. We need to keep you in the jail unit. So there's a hospital unit in jails. We need to keep you in that unit for another 6 months. And I said, okay. So I go, and now I'm separated from these guys who I knew. I like all the GED projects, all that stuff. I'm separated. I'm in this cell by myself. And to me, I was like, that's fine. I have some privacy, and I can. And so I'm there, and I finished my term in jail. Now I had an option to go home and like recover at home and then go back to jail. And I was like, no, let's just, I'm telling you, let's get this done. And so I go home and I start my life. Guy. And Tony says, hey, meet me in Los Gatos, right? Now, Los Gatos is like this swing. I'm like, whatever, let's go. And I get there. I still have my 2001 Lexus. And I get there, and Tony is dude, right? And he gives me a big hug, right? I didn't know he was out of prison. He gives me a big hug. And he says, and he hands me a piece of paper. It's this GED guy could, when I met him, he couldn't read, and now he's a GED. And he's crying, right? He gives me this big hug, and I'm thinking, bro, we're in Los Gatos. Someone's going to call the police. A swastika dude hugging an Indian, someone is calling the police. And he says, but really, this is what I'm excited about. And he hands me a card, and I said, what is this, right? He said, it's my union card. I got a job. And because I have a job, and because I'm clean and sober, I can see my daughter. I can see my daughter for the first time. Thank you. You gave me that. And I said, I didn't give you that. Alcoholics Anonymous gave you that. I just happened to be the person in that place. I was just a conduit. That's all I was. And that's what, like to me, that means there is a God out there. And it might not be Jesus, or might not be, but there is something there. And there's this power of this program that I fell in love with called AA. And there's other ways, but that was my way. And then a lot of those guys, some are still in prison, but others have left and they've gone to college. There's programs for inmates at California universities, and the Prison Poetry Project was what helped many of them get to those places, get to major universities, University of San Diego, University of Santa Cruz, Berkeley. And so I find myself, Farah, Cheyenne, I find myself very grateful that I had the ability to experience this thing called life. And I feel like I learned a lot more from those guys in that very dark place than I ever learned in law school or companies or any of that crap. And so the life that I have today is one it's very different. I'm a full-time dad and a husband, a much better husband than I've ever been, though I could be better. And I started a currency trading company where I trade for other people, and whatever I make, I get a percent. And I've built a lot of safeguards into it so that they understand 100% what it is they're getting. We only trade dummy money for 3 months before we trade real money. And everything I do today, I try to be as honest and ethical as I possibly can, which is a way that I learned in the last 9 years. It wasn't who I was. It's a way that I've learned. And I'm just very grateful for this life. So.
This was an incredible story, but one thing I want to ask you, when you think back to when you have both Farah and I over here very emotional, but when you think back to when you first heard the voice, right? You talked about that way at the beginning of this episode, and then you talked about hearing, a voice again. Do you think that this was the same one and the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% certain that it was the same. I'm 100% certain.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I mean, and the other thing that's so incredible to me, this isn't really a question, but feel free to respond back to it. You talked about being yourself in high school with that one female and saying, like, listen, if you don't like me, then go over there and sit with the popular kids. And then as we went forward, you continue to be your honest self, even though you say, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that this is what I should be saying to these people in order to get what I wanted from them. Right. But then you did the same thing when you were in prison with these other people, and then you ended up changing their lives. So I think really you're kind of like a superhero if you think about it. I mean, you are. You changed lives, but you stayed the same person that you were. You just learned how to use your power for good towards not the end as in you're no longer here, but towards this kind of end of your story, right? You learned how to use those powers for good.
I think so. I think you're right. I think you're right. I think there's something else that I would like to share. It's kind of funny. It's funny, not funny, right? While in prison and while I was going through the process of like getting gang leaders to come to my side, one of the gang leaders of the Latino gangs, by the way, you can make knives in prison. They're like one-use knives, but they will put you in a hospital, because what they do is they take paper, right? So like they take paper, right, like this, and they fold the paper and wet it and fold it, and you can sharpen it, right? And then they put feces on the end. And when you break somebody's skin with feces, they're going to the hospital. You can't clean that out fast enough. And so this guy has this knife and he puts it on my shirt and he pushes it, right? And I could feel it slowly piercing the shirt. And I know my skin is next. And he stands with this knife and he says, "You're going to stop teaching people to read." And I remember, like, it was the third time. So that voice, that was the third time I heard that voice. The second time was when that was happening. And I said, "God, what do I do? What do I do?" And the answer that came back was, "Trust me." And I responded, I'm like, that is a terrible fucking answer. That is not the answer I wanted, God. Trust me is not the answer that I was looking for. And so I just spoke and I looked him in the eyes and I said, "Listen, do what you have to do, but I'm not going to stop teaching." And he literally like let go of that knife. Like it dropped and it fell, and a guard saw it. A guard saw it hit the ground and pulled him out of the unit, moved him to a different unit. And afterwards, someone said, "What did you say to him?" Like, what did you say that had this guy like go into shock? You said what I said, and they're like, that is weird, because he would have stabbed you. Like those words would have gotten you stabbed by him. We don't understand what. And I said, I don't either. I told people about the God thing, and they were like, that's not God. But it was something. And that was the voice, the same voice from when I several years earlier, same voice said, trust me. And I was like, fuck, trust you? Come on, bro. You give me something better than that, right?
I want to bring up something real quick. Cheyenne and I we had a guest on a couple weeks ago named Jack Kammer, who is for men's issues. And he had this initiative that he did in the Baltimore prisons and jails. And it really turned Cheyenne and I over kind of a new leaf on how you think of criminals, because just the way that you're describing how a lot of these men are misunderstood for the fact that when they get out and how they reoffend, it's because they don't have people there to guide them, or they have like their women keep their kids from them. So the fact that you're bringing up that you gave these men a will to want to read and learn to be better, so that way their chances of reoffending, if they ever got out, their chances of being back with their children were so much higher, Rahul, than what they would have been if they didn't meet you at all. So yes, the fact that Cheyenne says, you might not think or look or be the norm of what God is to maybe these men, but you were the closest that they found to it when they were in prison, because you looked past their rap sheets and everything that they did wrong, and you gave them hope. So that's what your purpose is here, because a lot of us do it on the daily. We see a criminal, we judge them, we tell them they're not good enough to be back in society, or the women are like, you're not good enough to be a father anymore. So you were sent back for something great, which is making these men get that chance of being what they were born to do, which is not be a criminal. It was to be a father, because now at least they can be in their lives. We always talk about the the father in the home and how that could hinder a child's, is he going to follow the same path? Look what you've done. You have made that man take a different path to hopefully be there for his children more, to protect them from not ending up being one of those people sitting at an all races table.
Yeah.
So, that's where I go with your story, is matching, what, Cheyenne and I have learned, with that Baltimore initiative. There's people out there that are trying their hardest, because we are all blinded by a criminal. You see a criminal do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and just to kind of to add on to that,
Think about you anymore.
Oh, there she is. She's back. All right, we missed you there for a second, Farah.
It's been going off and on all night.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, I think a big part of my work has been for all of these years since I was 5, as we all pointed out at the beginning of this episode. No, it's been working with underserved populations. And I do strongly believe that there has to be some really good souls out there in our society that see people for their worth and won't allow them to be mistreated and misguided by the system any longer. And for you to see these people that you were with as human beings, which is how we should see people, speaks volumes about your character. So again, I truly believe that you're a superhero and that you learned how to use your powers for good.
Thank you.
And we want to end this episode. Wow, what a powerful conversation with Rahul, from losing everything to rebuilding a life of purpose. I'm trying here. His story is a testament to resilience and redemption. If you found value in this discussion, make sure to subscribe to Social Disruption YouTube and hit that notification bell so you never miss a live show. Sounded horrible. Go ahead.
It's all good. This is why we're doing this reel. If you want more unfiltered conversations, do you want more? Come on, people. Join us Monday and Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. Central on Podbean. You can download the app for free and just search Social Disruption Podcast. Follow us and get notified when we go live. You won't want to miss it. We're bringing on guests like combat spies, domestic violence survivors, authors, alien abductees, demon hunters, and so much more.
And of course, mark your calendars for Monday, February 24th, where tackling the culture war with a heated debate, should porn be illegal? Join us will be Vic Legina, a former producer and director in the adult entertainment industry for the world's largest company, Mansef, Marwin, and MindGeek. We'll get his thoughts on the issue and dive into his life and experiences.
Rahul's journey isn't just about money. As we have all learned here tonight, is about hope, second chances, and rewriting your future to become that superhero. Want to learn more? Visit thesurfingtrader.com. We'll be back with more raw, unfiltered conversations.
And until next time, remember, disruption starts with truth. Stay bold.
Stay unapologetic.
Stay disruptive. Peace.